Hello, my name is Dirk Brown. I'm the director for the McNair Institute for Entrepreneurism and Free Enterprise at the University of South Carolina. And I'm here today speaking with Jochen Mueller, the Vice President of HR for UPS International. Jochen, welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I was looking into your background to try and introduce you today. And as I was looking at your background, it's both very simple and very complicated. You've spent over 30 years at UPS in a variety of roles in a variety of countries. Rather than me try to walk through your bio, maybe you could talk a little bit about your journey at UPS.
So I really started in UPS during my studies, and I sorted packages. Yeah. And somehow, after a couple of weeks, I really liked the culture, I really liked the people I work with. And I got stuck, and after finishing my studies, I worked in HR, had a variety of roles in Germany. And really my first international experience in '98 when we rolled out sales compensation. So we started sales compensation outside of the US first, where we really tested what is possible. And I was the HR guy who was, setting up the policies, looking at the compensation pieces and so on. And I worked with a global team, which was already a great start into a global career.
That's yeah, I love that. That's a great segue into me asking you about innovation and entrepreneurship in large organizations. So yeah. Here at the University of South Carolina, and specifically at the McNair Institute, we talk about entrepreneurship as leveraging innovation to create sustainable value, independent of the enterprise size, independent of what was for-profit or non-profit. And our teaching and our sort of systems and processes are based on this idea that the techniques, tools, best practices we use to do innovation and entrepreneurship for small new ventures are equally applicable to larger companies, maybe even international companies like UPS. Can you talk a little bit to that maybe, and maybe give some examples? That was a great one, but maybe some other examples of where UPS employees and management have used innovation to create sustainable value for the company?
I mean, let me first start with the environment where we are coming from.
Okay.
I mean, UPS was founded 114 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was an entrepreneur because there was no such business model. He used 2 telephones from 2 phone companies in Seattle because no one had a telephone. So he collected messages and he had them delivered by boys, to the people, to the recipients. Obviously, disruption was pretty quickly coming, but then for decades we had a very sustainable model of B2B delivery of small package. We were growing, but you had to make sure you work really efficient. The more efficient you work, the better your global network works.
Okay.
So, and in this environment, now try to create innovation and entrepreneurship and risk-taking.
Different
and
company.
That is very, very difficult. It worked for decades, but in one point of time, you can imagine the environment significantly changed. All of a sudden, you have a gig economy. You can create an app and someone is picking up your package or delivering your package and you have no assets needed.
Yep.
So everything that we used on infrastructure and so on, you don't need to use anymore.
Right.
And that's something that many years ago we obviously were faced with, and we had to come up with, how do we address this? How do we create a culture that is more agile, fosters innovation, rewards risk-taking and so on. At the same time, still running the network where you are not allowed to do something stupid because you don't want to risk, a package not arriving where it's supposed to be.
Right. It sounds to me that like UPS has reinvented itself multiple times as a company and really made what we would call pivots in the entrepreneurial world, and doing another one now. What are the best practices or the tips that you might give us to think about how do you manage an efficient organization that needs to be effective in sort of a very strict set of processes and systems, and still have this innovation that you're talking about? Do you have some secret ways you can share with us?
No, I mean, there is no secret. I mean, but there are multiple ways that we have started to create an innovative spirit in the company.
Okay.
So you have processes like hackathons that you do. You have a certain project and you put people on there and they work through it and so on. Multi-functional, cross-generation, so that you have all the different collaboration that you need in order to be creative. We have actually an extra department in order to create some innovation. So they are working on what are the latest trends, and to see, how we can provide a certain product. But that's just like the top-down area. There is a lot of innovation that comes bottom-up. And we have also fostered this with some processes. For example, we have introduced many years ago action learning.
Okay.
And we have built a lot of action learning sets. That's how you call these teams. 6 to 8 people, again, cross-generational, cross-functional, cross-cultural, all over Europe, for example, different nationalities. And they are working on a project that most of them are completely unfamiliar with the issue.
Right.
And we teach them how to ask fresh questions, how to get the most out of our internal experts, but then also outside-ins. Talk to other companies, what have they done? Yeah. But also talk to customers that are also unfamiliar with the issue, but they might come up with questions or solutions that we never thought of.
Interesting.
And this has created a lot of innovative ideas that we have also started to integrate in our tools and our processes.
I was going to ask you about the global landscape, the shifting global landscape, because you're in a unique position to really understand what's going on really worldwide. UPS is one of the few companies that really operates truly internationally. And I was going to ask you if you had challenges with driving innovation in a company that was international, but you actually just talked about some advantages potentially in terms of diversity of thought, in terms of bringing in new ideas, even from people that don't know the problem very well. Can you talk a little bit more about that, the international landscape, and how you manage innovation across countries, across cultures?
Yeah, I can talk about this from the 2 different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And not everything goes well. We discussed this before. There are sometimes, there are some bumps in the road. Yeah. We had this policy, we have invented this policy of only making right turns. And we save miles, and we are much safer and so on. You can do this in a city like here where all the streets are square. Yeah. Now, try to teach your people that are driving in Paris through very small streets, half of them one-way streets and so on. It just doesn't work. Right. So some of the innovation that is coming top-down is just not applicable to international. We have seen this in automation, for example. We have some great tools to support our drivers. Orion, you might have heard this, that provides them with the route, very flexible and so on. And it saves a lot of miles. And you go to a low-cost country and you have the same cost for the investment because it's coming from here. Yes. It was supposed to be top-down. But if you save 10 miles, the saving is so minimal, it's only a fraction of the cost of your technology. You start thinking about, is it really worth doing it?
Interesting. So do you have a way of separating innovation between different countries then?
Yeah, by experience we had to.
Yes.
There is another example that I wanted to give you. When we create systems on a global scale and we start rolling them out here and they work very well, and then we have challenges that we couldn't foresee. Oh, we didn't foresee. We could have, but we didn't. Like you go into a country where there are no zip codes, but your system is based on zip code, sequence, for example. Or you go into a country where zip codes are alphanumerical. And then it needs a lot of rework to make your system work in those countries. These are things that you can avoid if you have multinational teams working on some of those solutions. So I'm always advocating for very small COEs, but then fill those slots, for project with people from the field that are working in different countries and different environments, and they bring this experience. And then your product that you're developing, is better fit for the market when you roll it out.
Yeah, that's great. And a few times now you've talked about diversity of the teams being key, I think, to the innovation process. And it is interesting to hear you talk about bringing in people from other countries. Even if you're piloting something in one country, you might think about bringing in a multinational team for that. Is that true? Yeah,
that's the other perspective. Bringing innovation or testing innovation in a small market outside of your core market. We have just launched a billing suite for our customers. Very easy to use tool. Before we rolled it out, we tested it and we started in Luxembourg.
Ah.
So Luxembourg is, I mean, kind of the smallest country we actually have. So, and it worked very well there, you know, not a lot of customers. And then we rolled it out in multiple countries. And if it works, you know, small scale, it's great. You can try it bigger scale. If it doesn't work, hey, no harm, you know.
It's funny because in startup, you know, for very small startup companies, we do the same thing. We have minimally viable product, which is what you're describing,
yes.
and then you scale from there. And
yes.
Similarly, earlier you were talking about these diverse teams in a design thinking format, right? You sort of understand making sure you're solving the right problem before you work on ideating the solution. So it's remarkable to me that the same techniques we use for a two-person startup in a garage work for a company the size of
oh yeah,
UPS.
absolutely, absolutely. And I also like, obviously I'm the HR guy, you know.
Yes.
I like to see how our people benefit from these experiences.
Yes.
Because you see throughout this process, you see them grow. If we teach them to ask open questions, very fresh questions, thought-provoking questions, they change their behavior when they go back and lead their teams. Interesting. You know, they change their behavior when they speak to customers. It is great to see. It's not only a tool to create innovation, it's a tool to develop our people as well.
This is great.
Actually, I was talking to another class this morning. I was actually at an HR conference, and there was a publishing company. They have a platform, very simple one, where you can easily produce communication material, which is online, you flip through. And we were thinking about this, and we said, how can we use this in our HR area? And we came up with an electronic welcome package, onboarding package for potential new employees.
Yeah.
They will be sent a link. It says, hey, welcome to UPS. Here is what UPS is about, and so on. So a lot of material that is always the same for our applicants. And then there is a section where we load from our database the offer for the employee. Here is your job. Click if you accept. And when they click, they get to the contract, because in most of the international we have written work contracts.
Yeah, of course.
It's in DocuSign. So it's electronically. So we got rid of all the paperwork.
Yes.
We immediately have the acceptance of the employee, and we know that the employee is going to start. This tool has been rolled out globally now. It's like after 3 years, maybe 4 years, which was, I mean, it was really refreshing when you see that something that you found, you know, a couple of years ago, and now you get corporate communication, you know, using exactly the same format, and you say, well, we did well.
So not all your innovation comes internally from UPS. You're learning from your customers. You're probably learning from your suppliers. And you're not too proud to take good ideas from other companies and use them at UPS. Right?
Oh no, absolutely not.
What in your career at UPS, if I could ask you a personal question, right? What are you most proud of personally in your 30 years of working at UPS?
I mean, from an HR perspective, I'm proud of all the people that I took along. You know, I have influenced, I think I've influenced many careers. I even had some months ago, someone call me and she told me, you didn't know it, but for the last 20 years you were mentoring me. So that I'm proud of that. I mean, you are also probably interested in the innovation-driven piece and the entrepreneurship. I was, when I was working in Germany, I was a manager in '95, and we had thousands of employees with paper files, and we didn't know, you know, where to put the paper, and scanning and archiving of documents was kind of coming up. Yeah. But there was no one that did it for HR. I was working with a couple of companies trying to understand how we could do that, and I pitched my management and I said, this is what we need to do, and I pushed them very hard, and we introduced it. And it is like 25 years ago. And I think the system was as advanced as the one that we are currently still using.
That's great.
So
that's great.
That was like the first thing.
It's amazing to be sitting here with you, because you have for such a senior executive, you have such a passion for new ideas and for driving innovation in the company, and so it's almost palpable to hear you talk about it. It's great. And then it's also very good to hear you talk about your your pride of mentoring your people. That's of course important for any organization. In terms of a student, if a student was thinking today about going in and thinking about their career planning, what advice would you give them in terms of thinking through their career if they wanted to be as successful, for example, as you've been at UPS?
Actually, probably the same advice that I gave my boys. I mean, first of all, they have to think about probably working for 40 years. The work over the next 40 years will dramatically change. Everything that we are doing will dramatically change. Everything what we have done in the last 30 years have changed dramatically. Yeah. They need, first of all, they need to find something that they like to do. It's their life. It's most of the time you spend at work. Yeah. So do something that you're really passionate about, and be flexible enough to change and take any opportunity. If you want to do something different, it's not just the money and the career that you can have. It's the happiness and the pleasure, and it's the life that you are looking forward to. You might do for a period of time something that where you earn less pay, but you build some skills that you can use in the future in order to even strive more. So if you keep up with the skills, if you have a continuous learning attitude, and then you are flexible to see whatever comes along, I think that will give you a life where the work life is a good part of your life.
That's a great, it almost sounds like you're talking about applying entrepreneurship to your life plan, leveraging innovation to create value for your life, being flexible in your life and creative in your life plan.
Yeah.
That's great. Can we talk a little bit about diversity in an organization? So in startup companies, oftentimes we think about diversity to drive innovation. What about a company like UPS?
Extremely important. And once again, going back to history, we are a trucking company. It's like, it's a dirty environment, it's noisy, it's hard work. So you don't get too many female applicants for those roles. And as we have a promotion from within policy, we had always a lack of talented female candidates. And when I talk about diversity and refer to female, this is what we measure outside of the US. Race is not really a term that you use in many countries. So we're really focusing on gender diversity. We have, for the first time this year, appointed a executive leadership team member responsible for diversity, equity, and inclusion. She was actually my boss before as a CHRO, and she is now heading up our efforts in promoting diversity. So we have pretty bold goals in international, and I'm really happy that I had the opportunity to work with my boss on a long-term succession planning strategy, where we're really targeting where do we want to be in 3 years, our top positions. How do we make sure we are 50-50, which is far from where we are right now. We need to be local, which means Asian leadership roles, not with expats, but with Asian talent. And with 50% female. Same in Europe, same in LATAM, same in Canada. So we really want to create a diverse environment that starts from there, and then we support diversity across all levels. What we are now doing is just not accepting anymore that it takes 20 years. We say, how can we make it happen in 3 years?
That's great.
And that requires us as well to divert a little bit from our promotion from within, because we will not have sufficient talent. So we are now looking for people externally as well that can fill those leadership positions.
Great.
Bold goals, but I think it will help us tremendously in order to create an environment of diversity and inclusion.
And how's it working? I mean, the COVID environment didn't make it easy to do something like that, I guess.
Yeah, the COVID environment did not necessarily change the need for leadership. It just changed their roles.
Interesting.
So we still have hired externally, and we still have promoted internally, probably as much as possible. People are retiring, people are finding other opportunities outside of our business, and we have replaced them. So there were opportunities, but the roles have tremendously changed. I don't think we will ever go back to the way we were working before.
Jochen, it's been what a great conversation to have with you today, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about your career, but also some thoughts for other entrepreneurs and other folks that are in business, and then also, of course, our students. So it was a pleasure to have you here today.
No, it was a great pleasure to be here, Dirk.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.